Let's look at per diem nursing. And in this video, I'm going to talk about what it is and whether or not you should consider it. Hey, this is Thomas from NurseMoneyTalk. So let's talk about per diem nursing because it's a word that just kind of gets thrown around right out of the gate. It is pretty much a nursing position or whatnot you can take. So if you're looking at the typical nursing positions, full-time, part-time, PRN, per diem being one of them, OPT, so all those slogans, but specifically per diem, it's a Latin term that translates to per day or for each day. So it's kind of more or less used when you're hiring nurses almost on like a temporary basis. So in this situation, your hours really wouldn't be guaranteed because a lot of times you might be kind of scheduled around like the staff who are off for vacation, sick leave, or where any shortages could be. In a way, this is kind of like in a sharp contrast to like a full-time and part-time positions where for the most part, your hours are typically guaranteed. Full-time, your hours will be typically guaranteed. And in a lot of ways, part-time, you're also probably going to be, somewhat guaranteed as well. That's kind of like the difference between when you're looking at a part-time and a per diem. And because you could have a situation where a per diem nurse actually works more hours than a part-time nurse, but at the same time, keep in mind that one's hours are guaranteed, which would be the part-time nurse, while the other one's hours, which is the per diem nurse, is not going to be guaranteed. Now, let's talk a little bit about what are some of these, like some pros and cons of why you might even decide to go with this route of, applying for a per diem nurse position. So before I get to that though, if you do find this video helpful, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. Go ahead and click that subscribe button if you want to be notified on any of our other videos as well. And also, if you haven't found a per diem nursing job yet, but you decide that, hey, I kind of want to check some out and see what's out there, you can go to our job board at nursemoneytalk.com/jobs. Link will be on the screen and then it will also be in the descriptions below. Let's get back to what I was talking about. So pros of working per diem is, a lot of times you'll be looking at a freedom to kind of make your own schedule. While you could have, and this is gonna vary from facility to facility, but some facilities I've been at, full-time and part-time could potentially be locked into like a certain schedule or certain pattern, if you will. And so like then the per diem nurse is then, or per diem nurses are then filling in kind of like those gaps or holes if somebody's on vacation. And so that's what's kind of nice about it is like you really can pick and choose the schedule that you want. If you want to work more this month, you could. If you want to work less next month, you can as well. You could pick up a shift like, every week or maybe even almost every day, depending on kind of like the need of the facility. Just really depends on what's going on. The second kind of pro of a per diem nurse is if you're in a situation where like you're not really wanting a lot of hours, so like I mentioned before, full-time and part-time, they'll probably have hour requirements, especially if you want to keep benefits or whatnot. You'll probably have to work 32 or 40 hours or whatever. Part-time might have to work, 20-something hours or whatever the case is. Of course, this is in a, looking at a week period or maybe even 2 weeks, depending on on your facility. But that's not really the case for per diem, because it really lends itself to not working a lot of hours if you just don't really want to. So I guess one use case for this could be like if you're in a situation where like maybe you don't really need the money or don't need a whole lot of it, but you just kind of maybe want to keep your skills up. Maybe you've been in the ICU, like you just want to pick up a little bit here and there, just kind of keep that skills up, keep your hour requirement for your nursing licensure up. And if that sounds weird to some of you, there are some states where like you have like an hours requirement. So like, you know, where you could have some states where you have to, I think you have to do like continuing education. Some states, like the one I live in, you don't have to do continuing education. You just have to, you know, work X number of hours, I think a year or something like that. I've always been full-time and worked more than full-time hours. So I've never really worried too much about that. But that's something to keep in mind. Oh, one last one that I almost forgot is that if you are a parent, you know, like maybe you're like a new mom and, you know, you're not wanting to be completely stay at home, but you do want to, you know, pick up shifts every now and then. Per diem would also like lend itself well to that as well. Number 3 is kind of like a diversity in work. So maybe you do work 40 hours, maybe you do work 40 plus hours a week, but you're not working at all in the same facility or the same department. So maybe you'll go work a little bit, maybe you do a little bit of psych nursing, maybe you do a little bit of med-surg nursing, or whatever combination you want. So like I've had situations where like, you know, we've had one that I've worked with a nurse that was doing, I think they were working mental health, and then they were doing oncology as well. You know, I've seen so many different combinations of that as well. The next one is the ability to earn more money. So per diem nurses tend to get paid more money per hour than regular staff nurses. And part of that is, and I'll get to more of this in the con section, is that per diems don't get benefits, and so your full-time and part-time, to a lesser extent, will get benefits as well. So part of how they make that how they make that adjustment is that, generally speaking, per diem, you could potentially be getting paid more money per hour than a full-time. So that's actually something to think about, or maybe like a strategy as well, is like if you are in a situation where you already have a spouse who has a consistent job and you don't need the benefits, then maybe it's something to consider, to consider just going per diem and raising your hourly wage, because if you think about it, some of your hourly wage is going to benefits, or the potential of benefits that you're not going to be using. So that's just kind of something to think about. So now let's talk about some of the cons of being a per diem nurse. So number 1 is your pay might not be stable. So I had talked about how you could potentially earn more money as a per diem nurse than as kind of like a regular staff nurse, which is true, but your hours, like I already mentioned, really aren't guaranteed quite the same way the full-time and the part-time nurses are. So when I was working and I had to cancel staff when the census wasn't where it needed to be, part of the track that I had to go through when it came to calling off staff was that pretty much full-time didn't get called off. So we were starting off with the, kind of like your per diems, your OPTs of the world, and then we would just kind of move down from there. So full-time pretty much hardly ever got called off. The one exception to this was if you were running, if you had a lot of overtime. I think that was like the one exception, if I remember correctly, was overtime kind of changed that, kind of like that step that I had to go through, but not counting overtime. per diem was going to be one of the first people canceled for sure. And then the other thing that I kind of want to point out about, about kind of like stability is that one of the things I've noticed is that there's kind of depending on where you work at, there might be a little bit of like a feast or famine when it comes to how like the hours you get. So like I've noticed like there'll be like stretches where like there's just a lot of hours to go. Like they cannot find enough staff to fill in these hours. And then you'll have a stretch where, there's just not that many hours that are available. And so that's just kind of something to kind of keep in mind as well as you're looking at per diem. Next one is that your work environment may not be stable. And by that, I mean that typically speaking, if somebody's gonna get floated, depending on where you work at, you're typically looking at your travel nursing, your per diem staff and whatnot before they touch like the core regular staff. Typically, a lot of times, or not a lot, I don't know, but I've seen this plenty of times where like the travel nurses might be contracted for a particular department or unit. So sometimes you could be up for it, like the travel nurses might not even get moved and you would have to be the one to get moved. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind as well. The next one, which I've already kind of touched up on, is that typically per diem workers aren't getting any benefits. So that means like no health insurance, no sick leave, no paid time off, no 401k, 403b, or whatever other employer sponsored retirement plan. But it's one of those things, where if you have a spouse that gets retirement, if you have a spouse who's eligible for like benefits, so like health benefits and whatnot, that might not, then, you might not necessarily need the benefits of of like your job. So per diem would be fine. And for retirement, you could do like an IRA, and to cover for like retirement investing. And so of course, if you're not getting sick leave or personal leave or whatever, that always boils down to like, if you're not working, you're not getting paid. But at the same time though, when you are working, you're getting paid more than you otherwise would have. Something else, number 4, and this has just been kind of some of the things that I've noticed a little bit, is that I feel like, when it's like not your core staff, you tend to not get as good of an orientation. And I feel like that's kind of something that, I think nurses at times don't think about. So, you're full-time, you're part-time, so your actual regular staff might get like the full orientation. But if you're looking at like your contract nurses, travel nurses, and I would kind of throw per diem in this at times, like you kind of get like a half-done orientation or a quick orientation, and then they just kind of want to get you to work. It's almost like, and kind of how I've seen it is like, they don't want to, you're not really invested in the facility because you're not core staff, if you will. And so the facility really wants to invest as little as possible into you. One question that I have seen asked is, why do I think it was like, why is it that facilities would even want a per diem staff? Like, is there really any benefit to facilities wanting this? And and there are some benefits to this as well, to why facilities might want this. So, if you think about it, the whole nursing shortage deal, it's a way for them to cover shifts if they're in desperate need. And, with them covering shifts, I think, they can also do that with travel nursing as well. So I think, I think they can actually pay in total less to per diem nurses than the travel nurses as well. Because keep in mind with travel nurses, the facility, the agency that sent the nurse is also getting paid as well. So you kind of have to look at them in combination. I think like one situation I heard was, I think the travel nursing was getting 50 but the facility was actually paying 75 or something like that. I think like 25 went to the agency, and then the travel nurse took 50 of that or something like that. The second reason, which I think this might be the bigger part of it, is that it's kind of like a way for them to get extra staff without really fully committing to another, to like a staff nurse. So, like I said, it's a way, if it's probably less so with healthcare maybe, but if you're just looking at overall broad per diem jobs, like if you're like seasonality, it's a good way to cover shifts, when there's seasonality involved. But of course, like I've kind of mentioned before, is that like a downside to that for these facilities when it comes to situations like this is that, you tend to have nurses who aren't really kind of invested in like the facility itself, because you're per diem, you're probably hardly there anyway, for a lot of them. And so if you are interested, if any of this kind of interests you and you do want to find a per diem job, like I already said before, go to nursemoneytalk.com/jobs. Link will be on the screen. Link will also be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you very soon in that next video.